So welcome. This is Amberdata, and we're going to be talking about Bitcoin today. Really excited about that. So I'm Taylor. I'm the open source and community developer at Amberdata. So I'm working with developers and helping them to integrate with Amberdata and helping them with their dApps as well, or any research that people are doing, and just generally helping the community. So we're going to talk about what Amberdata is, after which we're going to go over the API and explain that a little bit. Then we're going to introduce Web3data.js for people who aren't familiar with that. And then finally, we'll talk about JSON RPC using method calls, and then as well as using that in conjunction with our WebSockets. So we really love feedback here at Amberdata. If you could just shoot us an email or DM us on Twitter, or even going on our website, and you can message us on Intercom. We generally respond very quickly there. Yeah, so we like hearing what people like, and most importantly, what people don't like. So we want to make our services better for our customers. Therefore, we'd love to hear anything you have to say, whether it be about our API, our website, this webinar, Web3data.js, anything like that. We'd love to hear feedback from you. So for those who aren't familiar, Amberdata is kind of like this one-stop shop for all your blockchain-related data needs. It includes market data and multi-chain support as well, bringing on Bitcoin with that. We have blockchain analytics and metrics and security, which you'll see in our dashboards and our panels on our Explorer. So here's an example of a few of our panels that we have. Different panels showing things like network metrics, transactions, blocks, and then down below you can see we have our vulnerabilities overview, which really kind of goes to show kind of the vulnerabilities that you'll see in different smart contracts. We run audits on all new smart contracts that hit the Ethereum network, and then we post kind of our summary or report on our website. So you can go there and find that. Okay, so the API key. With all these examples, the first thing we have to do is we got to grab our API key. It's like really simple and fast. Most importantly, it's free. So we have our nice onboarding page here, which really goes through the steps of what it takes to get an API key. So first, you're creating your account and signing up. After which, you can go to your API key page and you can generate a developer key. It's completely free. Once you have that, then you can go and start using that in our examples, whether it be in our docs or if you're playing around with it yourself. And then that's where we're at now, is at step 3, which is adding our SDKs. So in this case, we're going to be talking about Web3data.js. Okay, so our API has over 100 endpoints and counting. Right now we have real-time and historical blockchain and market data. Right now we've brought on multi-chain data support, as well as JSON RPC, which we will also go over. So our documentation is right here. Gives you a nice overview, some details about our API. On this side, you can see a list of all the different methods we support, including our WebSocket events and our JSON RPC methods. Really neat thing about these docs, you can throw in your API key right here, and then after which you can start testing out the API and getting like live data back to kind of see what that looks like. Okay, so Bitcoin. We just announced it and we're really excited about that. So we have one of the most comprehensive offerings. All the same API endpoints that you just saw in our docs, and then all the same Web3data.js methods if you've used that before. And we also have RPC call support and WebSocket support. And so we'll show you in a second what that looks like in terms of same API endpoints and Web3data.js methods. Okay, so one API, many chains and networks. So it's really simple to switch using our headers. So you have a blockchain ID, and you can switch between mainnet and Rinkeby and Bitcoin or any other network chain combination. So everything remains the same. You're just changing the header, and then you can start hitting the same endpoints, whether it be like getting a balance, getting a transaction, getting a block. You just change your header, and then you can start making those calls. With Web3data.js, it's almost just as easy. So in this case, I have an example where we're creating our Web3 data instance. We start with a blockchain ID of Rinkeby, and then our first call here is going to be hitting Rinkeby because that's the blockchain ID that we specified. After which we're namespacing with ETH. So now we're going to be hitting Ethereum mainnet. Anything namespaced with .eth will be hitting the mainnet network. And then finally, down below, we see the .btc namespace, which will now be getting a Bitcoin balance for an address. So it's really, really super simple there. Okay, so Web3data.js, again, is it's a JavaScript SDK, Node.js, and it makes it easy for app developers or researchers or anyone really to start building on top of Amberdata's API. It's intuitive and simple, as you just saw with switching between chains. There's what I call smart logic under the hood in terms of the way that it can change between historical or current data based on the parameters that you supply. And finally, it frees up your development time so you can focus on the core logic of your dApp. And we also now have our Web3data.js documentation. This makes it a lot easier to get started using Web3data.js. There's an overview here, a quick start, and then we have different examples that you can pull from. Okay, so to begin, we install it because it's an npm package. You can also use our CDN. There's more details on our documentation about using it in the browser. We're going to focus on Node right now. After which we import it, and then you instantiate it. You set your API key upon instantiation, and after that, every call you make is going to be hitting that, hitting our endpoints using that API key. Okay, so we're going to walk through a few examples. And again, we're going to be specifically focused on Bitcoin. If you saw any of the previous ones, we were looking at Ethereum. So our get block endpoint. So this enables us to get a single block, whether it be by the number or the hash. So we call it the ID. And then from that, we're going to get a whole host of data coming back. We also have the option to specify validation methods, which would specify whether we want to include details to validate that block. So it's kind of like the granularity, like what level of detail do we want to come back? Do we just want the, just the basic payload, or do you want enough of the data that we need to actually validate that block? Okay, and so using Web3data.js, it's like super simple. We're using our BTC namespacing, and then we're using our block namespacing, and then we're going to get block. And so this is the data that comes back, similar to what you saw in the docs. So we have the difficulty, duration, the block hash, etc. All the basic details that you'd want to know about a block. And this is the way you do it using Web3data.js. All right, so now we're going to look at what it looks like to do a transaction. So kind of the same deal. We're going to give it a hash, right? We're going to give it a way to identify that transaction. And once we do that, then we can hit our endpoint and get a list of the transaction data that we want there. Similar to our block endpoint, we can also add validation method to transaction. So this would include certain values that are needed to validate that transaction fully. Another really cool feature is the include price. So this will enable us to get historical market data okay, so it's a historical price for that transaction in its currency. So let's say we're transferring ETH. It will show you the price at that time when you made that transaction in the currency of your choice, which is actually pretty powerful. So we'll show you an example of what that looks like in with Web3 data. And so as you can see here, we're getting this this transaction from Bitcoin using the Bitcoin namespacing. And we have the block number, and then we have also the number of confirmations of that transaction. But what I want to point out here is this pricing object, and this is coming back because we've specified that we'd like to include the price in the payload. And so this pricing object is going to show us the value of this transaction in USD based on this quote price at the time of the transaction. So looking at this timestamp, is actually, looks like it was today. And so this took place, and it looks like we transferred over $100,000 in this transaction. So it's really cool that we're able to pull that context in and kind of wed the blockchain and market data together as well. And so from there, we can see there's also a lot of other data that we want, including like our inputs and outputs, so our to's and froms, so we're calling them. And then this would be the value in the lowest denomination of Bitcoin. And so we're taking this quote price and then multiplying it by that number to getting our the total value here. Okay, and then we're going to look at what it looks like to get the balance of an address. So we're going to start with like getting the latest address balance. So this is our account balance's latest endpoint. It's pretty straightforward. You give it an address, and then it comes back with the value, as you can see right here. So, and then we have our historical balances endpoint. And again, same deal, give it an address, but this time we're going to be looking at historical data. So it's going to give us back the complete historical data of that address. So anytime that balance changed. And here's what it would look like using Web3data.js. So the first one we're going to use is get latest balance. And in both cases, we're including the price. So as you can see, when we console logged that, we're going to get this payload similar to the one we just saw. And again, we're including the price. So we can see the value of that address, of this Bitcoin address, as well as the total amount. So it looks like this one has almost $500,000, which is quite a lot. So this is the current balance of this address. But if we would like to see the historical balance, we're going to have this payload that looks like this. So the first thing I wanted to point out is the metadata. So this is going to hold our columns, which specify to the index of the data in our matrix or our array of arrays that comes back. So we have our address, block number, timestamp, the nanoseconds value, and then price. And the price is there because, again, I specified include price here. So for instance, here is the price or the current balance, or not the current, sorry, the balance of this address at this timestamp right here, this timestamp right here. And so you can see the value and then the price like we saw earlier. Okay, so now we're going to look at JSON RPC. So we kind of looked over the basic endpoints, basic methods that we can use. So JSON RPC is something that Geth uses, that Bitcoin CLI uses, and it's kind of the standard, this lightweight remote procedure call protocol. And our WebSockets use it, and also our JSON RPC API uses it for obvious reasons, because that's what Geth and Bitcoin CLI use. So our JSON RPC API kind of looks like this. This is what you'd use to make a call as if you're talking to the Bitcoin node itself, right? So in this case, we're looking at get best block hash, and we're going to send it similar to this pattern right here, and we'll be hitting our RPC endpoint. And so we can kind of go here in the documentation, and we can actually go through and we can see all the list of method calls that are supported. And these are specifically Bitcoin. As you can see, these ones are prefixed with ETH, so we know these are for the Ethereum network. And so that's how you would, this is how you would interact with that node, like directly. Okay, so we can also use Web3data.js to perform the same operation. But in this case, it's a lot simpler. So again, we're using our BTC namespace, and now we're going to use RPC. So this parameter right here can either be a single value, or it can be an array, including the parameters if those are necessary. But for get best block hash, we don't need any parameters. So we're just going to get the best block hash, and it returns directly from the node. So you're going to get the exact same object coming back as if you're using Bitcoin CLI. So this is the best block hash at the time we ran this. Okay, so now we're going to look at Web3data.js WebSockets. And what this does is it abstracts away the JSON RPC. They conform to standard WebSocket implementation, so you'll be familiar with on, once, off, connect, disconnect, and it's very compact in its concise syntax. So our support events, blocks, we have address blocks, address transactions, then just all transactions and pending transactions. There's market data, trades and orders. That applies to all chains, and then a few more events that you can go in the docs and see there. So here's what it looks like using our JSON RPC, using the JSON RPC methods to subscribe to WebSockets. I'm going to show you kind of like the harder way, and then we'll look at what it looks like using just Web3data.js. So here's an example of subscription request. So we're going to specify the version, the client ID, the name of the method to be invoked. In this case, we're going to be subscribing to block, and we're going to be subscribing to a specific block. So as soon as this block comes through, boom, we're going to get a subscription notification. It's going to look something like this, right? So once we've subscribed to something, it's going to come back with a subscription response. So this is saying, hey, you subscribed to this event, and I'm acknowledging that. That's what the server is going to do. Now we're subscribed. If there's any error, we'd see it here. Once we're subscribed, we're going to be waiting for this, our event response. So again, it's going to come back in the same format. And this time we're going to get the result. So we have the blockchain ID. In this case, it's Bitcoin. And then we're going to get this number that we were looking for. And finally, we're going to get this subscription response, the subscription ID, sorry, that we saw that was returned in the last subscription response. So we need to keep track of those IDs so we know which subscription is coming back from which. So we're going to end up with a kind of a big switch case to kind of and like a mapping that we'll need to facilitate under the hood. So without Web3data.js, it kind of looks like this using a WS node package. So we are setting our blockchain ID and our WebSocket URL, and then setting our headers as well. And then we're going to listen for it to open. Once it's open, we're going to send our subscription request, and then we're going to wait for our data to come in. So in this part right here, this is where we're going to want to like differentiate between a subscription request response or an event response. So again, there's going to be some logic that has to take place over there. But with Web3data.js, it's like a lot more simple, right? So we specify our blockchain ID again. So we're looking at Bitcoin. We're going to initiate the connection, and then finally we're going to listen for the block event. So any new block, and we're going to get an event response from that. So here's kind of an example of what that would look like. So we're again, waiting for initializing it with our API key and our blockchain ID, and then we're going to do a connection. Now, this is a method that once a block comes in, it will log it, and then it will automatically unsubscribe from the block event. It will still be connected, but it'll be unsubscribed from that specific event. Similar to this one, this would be waiting for all transactions. And if you run this, it could take up to 15 minutes because blocks right now in Bitcoin are really slow. And the event transactions will come through once the block comes through. Okay, perfect. So we've gone through everything that we wanted to. Looked at the API, looked at our JSON RPC and WebSockets, and then kind of showed off what it would look like to start getting blockchain data with Web3data.js or with our API. So if you guys have any questions, yeah, just feel free to raise your hand. If not, thanks for listening. I have the slides available here, and there's our website, our documentation, and don't forget to follow us on Medium and Twitter.